Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. How's it going, everybody? Glad some of you can join me here. That looks great. Happy to see everybody. Awesome. I appreciate it. Here I am again. Hey, hello, Herr Ketterman. Oh, so good. We've got some questions coming in already. I've got a few of them, so that's great. I'll let everybody get in on YouTube, and we're streaming live over there on my YouTube channel. So I do this StreamYard. We get a few people in here. So thanks for joining me. I'm going to try something different this morning, or today, actually this evening, whenever you're watching this, I guess I should say. I shouldn't talk in the present tense because a lot of people watch these after the fact. So I'm going to try something different in this show, this broadcast, though. I want to have a little more, not formal, but a little more maybe instructive, if you will, that will be maybe helpful. I get a lot of emails through the week about people commenting on things and asking about things. It's great. And I try to take those to heart and make changes if I can and adjust accordingly. So I want to do, if we take up your time and take up my time, I want to make this the most effective way to spend your time, especially trying to get to the core of some of the problems and issues and questions around what collodion, both technically and conceptually. So I'm going to try something a little different in this show. We'll get to that in just a second. So thanks everybody for joining me. This is a great way to spend an hour and a half of your time, I hope. It is for me. I totally enjoy doing these, and I'm glad that I can do these again. Hello, Bernd from Tuscany. Wow, you're in a nice part of the world. I love Tuscany. That's awesome. I hope everybody's healthy and happy and doing well. The mountain projects are going on as we speak. I just met about my house, a quick little update there. Maybe, fingers crossed, maybe we'll have our house built and up by November, which would be awesome. This is the end of July. So there's a lot of work to do, but that will be awesome. And then my next project will be putting up, I don't know if you guys have ever seen these shipping containers. I've already bought one. I can look out the window over here and see it. I'm using it as storage. They're 40 feet long, 8 feet wide, and these are high cubes. They're 9.5, almost 10 feet tall. I'm going to buy 2 more of those, and I'm going to connect them together and weld them together. And then I'm going to cut out the centers of them. So they're 16 feet wide, 40 feet long, and 10 feet high. I'm going to use half of that as my studio and dark room. I'll have a north light. I'll cut out the ceiling and the walls for North Light Studio on one portion. And then on the other side, I'll have my blacksmith and bladesmith shop, and that'll be next to the house, plus a greenhouse, plus all kinds of stuff. So we have a ton of projects going, but they're all good. It's all good and positive. So hopefully by next spring, I'll be able to, I've already had a couple of people ask me about this. I'll be able to have people come up and spend a week with us on the mountain here, do workshops, hike around, watch all the wildlife. We have all kinds of stuff. We have a bear out here. We have a big cinnamon, 700-800-pound cinnamon bear going through the mountaintop here and just raising hell with everybody's garbage. And I saw him the other day. He went right out, I was up having coffee, looked out the window, and I said, "What?" And there's a big old cinnamon bear just trucking right across our property. And he's got a bunch of bear scat up here. I fell a tree the other day. There's a bunch of bear scat up there. Big bear, big one. And little bothersome to have a bear so close with so many, there's a few folks up here on the mountain. And so we'll keep an eye on that. We might have, the Department of Wildlife's probably going to have to come up and do something about that bear. But anyway, that's a quick update on my personal life. Not that you care about it, but I always want to keep you posted a little bit on that. So more importantly, maybe next spring, depending on the whole COVID thing and all this crap going on in the world, hopefully we'll get some people up here next year to hang out and have fun in the dark room and make plates way up high where the UV is strong and there's not a lot of interference for that exposure and making plates. So let me do this. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to change this format just a little bit. And I want to do, this is the agenda that I want to kind of go through. I'll show you this here. let's see, where am I here? Chrome tab. Yeah, right here. Today, I want to show you what I'd like to do. This is what I'd love to be able to do here. Can everybody see that, I hope? Let's see if, yeah, good. I love it. This is what I want to do. Hey, Deidre, good to see you. Troy, I hope Troy's with you there, I think, probably. Welcome, welcome. This is what I want to do. I want to go through these 5 topics today. And I know some of these, you know, you guys will check out on. Some of you won't be interested. That's okay. Some of you are. And I want to address this. And I haven't got to fully address some of these issues completely. A friend wrote me a while back. He just released a new film about collodion, the collodion process. It's not a technical film. It's called Collodion, the Process of Preservation. Eric Overton is his name. I'll show you. We'll watch a clip together. You can watch that free on Amazon if you want to check that out. It's a full-length film. It's got some awards in the film festivals. We'll talk about that. But in between that, I want to start today by explaining the differences. I had a couple of people, and I've had a lot of this over a period of time. I've had a couple of people ask me about what's the difference when you talk about negatives. What do you mean negatives versus positives? Positives and negatives. Positives being ambrotypes, tin types, aluminotypes, whatever you want to call them. Black glass, plexotypes, black glass ambrotypes, clear glass ambrotypes. Whatever the direct positive on the plate is versus the negative that you print with. I'm going to explain that technically just a little bit. Then we'll do a couple of technical questions. I know Samuel's already written in, and Karsten has as well too, about asphalt paint and Sanderac and all those things. So we'll address all of those. And Tim Fry, I don't know if Tim's in here yet today or not, let's see, what do we have here? Is Tim down here somewhere? I apologize. I'm not super technically savvy with this yet, but Tim Fry gave his recipe for the alternative to KCN fix, which I'll share with you. And hopefully you can grab some screenshots or go back to the YouTube video. And I'm going to try to upload this little slideshow presentation I'm doing today so you guys can see the recipes, see everything we talk about and all that. So that's what I want to do. I want to first talk about, and then criticizing photographs. There's a great book. Well, I'll explain when we get there. There's a book by Terry Barrett called Criticizing Photographs. And I've used this a lot in the past to both in formal lectures, informally, just talking about how we talk about photographs, there's Tim. Good to see you, Tim. I'm going to share your recipe today. How we talk about photographs, how we understand. There's so many people, there's so many photographers and artists making photographs, and I don't care what process you use, whether it's digital or film or collodion or, lensless or whatever you're doing. There's so many people out there making photographs that don't know how to talk about photographs and don't know what to look for or any kind of methodology to explain what you're looking at, why you're looking at it, why you like it, why you don't like it, or just formally criticizing. And we'll talk about the word criticizing as well too, but I want to address that a little bit. There's a few slides on that. We'll go over that. And that's pulled mostly directly from Barrett's book. And if you don't have that book, I'll share it with you. And if you want to get it, you might find it interesting. I hope you do anyway. And then I'm going to talk briefly about, after criticizing photographs, I want to talk briefly about making a body of work or working in the project form in collodion. What's the difference? How are the approaches different in making a body of work, working kind of in a narrative form, a storytelling form? How do you make those choices? What are some of the questions you want to address? Those kinds of things. I'd like to talk about that a little bit. And you guys can chime in anytime you want. If you have questions or you want to stop me, that's fine. And then finally, we'll look at that clip of Eric's new film, which is quite exciting, actually. It's going to be kind of neat to share that with you guys. So let's go back over here and talk about some of these things. Negatives and positives. Let's start with this. Let's start with talking about what does this mean when we talk about what is a positive and what is a negative. Let's start with the basis here. Let's start with the formal kind of question or starting point. There are no positives in this process. There are only negatives. In most photography, unless you're talking about chromes or the old slide film or Cibachromes would be another printing process that you could use. But chromes, everything else is when we talk about photography, we're usually talking about a negative to print with. Now, keep in mind, the first two processes were one of each, right? The daguerreotype and the talbotype or the calotype, the paper negative and the direct positive on a silver covered copper plate. Those two are the direct result. The combination of those are a direct result of the wet collodion process in 1851. Archer coming together and saying, look, we have a dilemma. We have a sharp one-off daguerreotype, and we have a printed paper negative, usually albumin or salt, right? We have kind of a soft, fuzzy print from that paper negative, and we have a direct positive that's sharp, but one off. So wet collodion kind of filled that gap. And Archer's first image or images were negatives. Positives didn't come along until after the fact, so to speak. So when we talk about the wet plate process, there are two variants, positives and negatives. But really, if you want to get down to the brass tacks, what we're talking about are just all negatives. They're all negatives. Positives are negatives. They're just very thin and unprintable negatives. So when we talk about this, we say negatives and positives. What we're really talking about are exposure values, some of the development and some of the chemistry process or techniques and methodologies we use to produce these, and the substrate. All right, so let's start with this. Here we have and we're going to talk about a clear glass negative and clear glass positive. So the difference between those two are shorter positives, underexposed negatives. Negatives are dense, rich, non-positive, if you will, images, meaning that a direct positive that looks good against a black surface or made on a black surface, right? Black glass, ferrotype, alumatype, plexi-type, black plastic, whatever you're making that direct positive on, it's underexposed. It's an underexposed negative, right? Because again, there are no positives. It's an underexposed negative. They're shorter exposure times by about 1.5 to 2 times. So if you go the other way and you want to make a negative, you're increasing that exposure time first off. Secondly, it's shorter development time, 15 seconds or so, versus a minute or 2 minutes for a negative. More reducer, which is the iron. Remember these words, reducer, pulling those halogens down to the pure metallic state of silver. So there's more reducer iron, 4% versus a 2%, 40 grams more or less in a liter of iron for positives, 20 grams more or less for negatives. So there's about half of the reducer, half of the iron in negatives versus positives. There's more or less restrainer, the more reducer, less restrainer or acid in the developer, 3% versus 9%. That's quite a difference. There are more iodides in the collodion in negatives or in negatives versus positives, just 0.2% more or less. And the silver bath's a little different. You have a lower pH in positives and a higher pH in negatives. Let's talk about those real quick. First off, we know about exposure. Obviously, the more light that strikes the plate, the more silver you're going to produce. You start that reduction with that light energy hitting the plate. So we know right off the bat, the more light we have on the plate, the more silver we hope to produce. So the shorter the exposure, the less amount of silver you're going to produce on that plate. The shorter development time, not necessarily building the silver that way, but what you're doing there is you want a very thin image, because what you're going to do, you don't need much to produce a positive. And you guys that do this quite often know this. You take a positive on glass, right? Because you need to see through it. And you hold it up to the light and use transmitted light. Man, it looks like there's no information there at all. And then you put it against something black and use the reflected light off of that, and there's the full image in all its glory. Very little silver is needed. So short exposure, shorter development time, 15 seconds more or less, right? This isn't complete gospel. We're just talking in general terms. More reducer. You want more iron, meaning that you want to punch that hard. Whatever's there, you have 15 seconds. Your highlights 3 or 4 seconds, your midtones 7, 8, 9 seconds, and your shadows start appearing about 12 seconds. Versus the negative, anywhere from 45 seconds to a couple of minutes. You can develop these negative plates, right, on glass. Less restrainer in the developer. So you pull that image up quickly on a positive. And I kind of put this in there. I probably shouldn't have, but there's more iodides in the collodion in the negative collodion versus the positive collodion. So you're shooting for a more contrast, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll talk about that in a second. So I should have said there's less ammonium iodide or less iodides in the positives than the negatives. And we'll get to that in a second. And then the silver bath, the pH. The lower pH in positives and the higher pH in negatives. And in layman's terms, what this means, we've talked about pH before, but in layman terms, what this means is you're applying more silver or trying to reduce more silver on the negative than you are the positive. And so the shorter development times, adjustment in chemistry, all those things make the direct positive. So the bottom line up front, or the bluff on this, is positives are quickly developed underexposed image that will produce a thin layer of silver on the substrate. Backed with something black using reflected light, the image will appear as a positive. It will not produce a good pop print, right? So that's a caveat there. It will not produce a good pop print. Pop print, printing out paper, albumin, silver, collodial chloride, et cetera, anything that you contact print. Sometimes on some bright ambrotypes, you can get some really nice gelatin silver or silver gelatin modern prints, right? Ilford contact paper, the bromide papers. Sometimes on bright ambrotypes, you can get good contact prints or enlarged prints from those with a little bit of adjustment. But normally, most often, you will never produce a good pop print with a direct positive in wet collodion. So that's kind of the gist on those. Going to the negatives. So here we say a properly exposed plate developed for a longer period of time, revealing the details and subtleties, will produce a dense and relative dense plate suitable for printing out on paper or glass. And I put glass there because sometimes, I print these negatives on glass. As if you've seen my YouTube videos, you've seen those things. So a little bit of an overview. I hope, I know people have asked me a couple of times. I hope that kind of gives a general idea. Positives are thin. Think of them as a very, very thin negative with put on black using reflected light. Negatives are the proper, full, dense film, quote unquote, negatives that you use transmitted light to go through the negative, the glass onto paper. And if you're doing pop prints, which you probably are if you're using wet collodion, not always, but usually are doing some form of pop print, you want a very relatively dense negative versus the positive. And I hate to use the word dense because we're not talking about There's a line there that you have to draw. They're dense in comparison to positive. Let me put it that way. So relatively speaking, you need quite a Dmax on a wet collodion negative for an albumin or a salt print is 3 or 4 times that of a positive for a nice positive reflected light. Reflected light versus transmitted light, printing versus viewing against a dark surface. That's what we're really talking about here. So a big difference. So when people say, oh, here's a wet collodion negative, printed on, Kodak or Ilford paper, that's really, I mean, it is technically a wet collodion negative, but it's really a bright positive or an overexposed positive. You're getting to that negative stage, but usually when we say negative, we're talking about wet collodion negatives that will print on pop paper. Kind of everything else are positives, whether they're bright ambrotypes that will print on modern developing out paper, or positives that just look good on a black surface or a black substrate. When we use the word negative in wet collodion, we mean something that will print on pop. That's kind of the definition there. So hopefully that makes sense. So let's do some technical Q&A. Here's what Tim sent me this week, or the other day, whenever it was. Sorry, Tim, I can't remember. This is the alternative fix for KCN. And if you wanted to, you can either screenshot this or go back to the video, or you can write it down. I'll leave it up for a minute as we talk about it. This is an ammonium thiosulfate and thiocyanate mixture, meaning that, as you can read here, I believe this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but I believe this is from Mike Jacobson at Artcraft. As you can read there, thiocyanate, like KCN, will dissolve metallic silver. And remember, we talked about what the purpose of fix is. After you develop your image and you stop it under your water, you remove all that developer and acid and iron and all that. You stop that. You put it in your fix tray or fix bath. What you're doing is you're removing all of the unexposed silver. So you have time to remove that and reveal the image. The cyanate will dissolve or reduce that, remove that silver like KCN. Now, the question that I have about this, I've made this before and used this years and years ago. It works great. It's really lovely, produces a nice, if you like that warmer color in your positives versus the cooler color. The cyanate, this particular, I don't even know what to call it. I don't, a cyanate fix. I don't know the archivability of this, so I'm not really clear on where we stand in how archival this is. I would imagine it's archival for our standards for sure, but I would imagine it's fairly archival. When I see thiosulfate, again, I see that silver bound up with it. There's longer wash times, et cetera, et cetera. So regardless, it's a great alternative if you can't get KCN. This is a great alternative to use, and it's fairly inexpensive as well, far less expensive than KCN. So you can see the recipe there. Make any quantity you want and try it. See what you guys think. It's a great alternative for KCN or in lieu of KCN. So I want to run. Let me come back to the questions here, and I want to run these questions. Let's do this show. Let's go to the first one. I just learned how to do this. So let's go to the first one, and it's Samuel up here somewhere. There we go. So let's do the first one, then we'll go to Carson. You guys can see that, right? Can you see the question on the board? Yeah, good. Okay. Could you talk about what I can do in dry weather on the field or in the field to prevent negatives from drying too quickly? And also, how do you prevent albuminized edges visibly appearing in the image? those are great questions. Number one, I think, Samuel, if I'm reading this right, is talking about the collodion drying out or the actual plate drying out. We can address both of those. There's a formula you can use. If your plates are drying out, the collodion, like if the collodion's drying down, you pour your plate, before you can sensitize it, right? If you get it in the silver bath, it dries out, or after you pull it out of the silver bath, you go too long and the plate starts drying. Drying collodion will come from the edges down in. They're almost like rings. It'll come into the image as it dries down. It never dries from the center out. You can tell an image drying down. I give a good example of that in my book, I think. You can see the edges drying down on the collodion. How do you prevent that? You can prevent that using a little more alcohol, which is actually water, in your collodion when you mix it, or add a little more alcohol when you reconstitute. Rather than just ether, you can add a little alcohol. The danger of that is that you could run into some crepey lines or some problems that way if you add too much water. But the water will keep the collodion wet longer. Now, if you're asking about drawing after the fact, you make your negative and you either don't want to fix it in the field or you want to redevelop it when you get home, use a 50-50 glycerin distilled water mixture and pour on the plate. That'll keep the plate wet, right? And then you can wash that off in your studio or darkroom at home to redevelop it, to fix it, however far out you go in the process in the field. The glycerin water combination will keep that plate wet. It will not allow it to dry out. So you can rack them, you can stack them, you can put them in boxes. You don't need water. Jan showed us last time what he uses, and I've used this a lot myself, are the little plastic sandwich trays. And depending, if you're making larger plates, those are a hassle. If you're making, whole plate or smaller, those are great. Just stack them up, put distilled water in them. They wash them. You get a nice wash trip home, keeps them wet, all that, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope that answers the question. And then the second part, how do I prevent the albuminized edges? What he's from showing when you print or in the image, what he's talking about is I recommend albuminizing the plate, glass. This is glass, right? You don't have to do this for different plastic or aluminum or ferrotypes or any of those. This is glass. After you deburr, clean it, sand the edge off, clean the glass, I recommend you use a weak albumin solution and a Q-tip. Dip your Q-tip in and go around the edge of the plate, 3 to 5 millimeters. That puts a layer of albumin on the edge of the plate that's pretty transparent. You can still see it if you turn the plate, and it'll keep your collodion attached to the plate so you don't have the lifting and peeling. So if you didn't get your plate quite clean enough, if you roughed up the edge, if you're out sloshing around in the field, those kinds of things, you don't have what I call that fish gill, that one little edge that starts peeling up, and then the whole layer of collodion comes off your plate. That little edge of albumin will help prevent that. Now, if you don't like the way that prints out, you'll have a little more density. The albumin will add a little density to that negative as you print, or even visually seeing it. If you don't like that and you want to get rid of that, I recommend that you albuminize the entire plate. Steam it up a little bit, pour that 20-to-1 dilution of albumin and water on the plate, tip it up, let it drain and dry. You'll have the entire plate covered with albumin. That'll do two things. That'll get rid of that edge you're talking about, and that'll add density to the entire plate if you're printing. And it'll, of course, do the same exact thing as preventing that collodion from lifting from your plate as well, too. So that's kind of a big deal if you want to if you want to use glass and make negatives, or glass and make positives. And you can still see, even on the positive, you can still see the edges of that. So I hope that answers your question. So let's go to Karsten's question. He says, hi, Quinn, I want to paint the silver layer directly with asphalt paint. Should I apply the Sanderac varnish before? This would prevent the asphalt from coming into direct contact with the silver. These are great questions. I appreciate them. And they're great for the audience and the people watching this video, because these are very common questions that come up regularly. So what Herr Ketterman or Carson's talking about is he's talking about having your glass positive, your ambrotype, clear glass ambrotype, and he wants to take asphaltum, this black. I use Angel Gild. It's basically rotar. It's gilsonite dissolved in a solvent, in turpentine or some solvent. And you can actually, I dilute mine down 1 to 3. You can actually pour it on the glass, put a nice layer on there, let it dry, and it turns this piece of glass into this beautiful, dark, rich black backing, easy for me to say, and that gives you that wonderful reflected light. So the more black, the more sheen, the more reflective quality you have on whether you put a piece of velvet, whether you use a alumatype, whether you use a ferrotype or aluminum, whatever black. The best black usually is black glass. That's the highest sheen. That's the highest reflectivity. That's why black glass ambrotypes look so good. This process, and you can find this on my YouTube channel. Go search backing ambrotypes with asphaltum or something. You can search that and find it. And I show you how to do this. This asphaltum is unmatched for the quality of image you'll get on clear glass. It's just lovely. So what he's asking, he says, I want to pour that asphaltum right on the silver. I don't want to pour it on the glass side. I want to pour it on where the collodion and the silver is, right? And he's concerned with putting that asphalt on the collodion and the silver. There is some concern with that, obviously, but here's the thing. You're absolutely correct with that. Varnish that plate first, let it dry and cure. Then you can pour the asphaltum directly onto that varnish side. You turn it around, you have that beautiful millimeter, 2 millimeters, whatever thickness of glass. You peer through that to that image. That image is blackened. It's got a beautiful color to it. Again, if you go watch that video, you'll see what I mean. They're gorgeous. I've actually done it both ways. I have images 10, 12 years ago that I just poured the asphaltum right on the collodion and silver. No problem. I mean, 10 or 12 years is nothing, but I do actually have, and I've shown this, I have a portrait of a woman from, it's the 1870s. It's a glass ambrotype that's actually, they poured asphaltum on the unvarnished collodion silver side, and it looks good. It's 140 years, 50 years old, and it looks good. You're not always going to get that. You do run a risk, just like everything, anything we do today. We don't know exactly what the products are, how we're using them, if they're going to last, those kinds of things. So buyer beware, but you can do that. And I actually prefer, Carson, peering through the glass to the image. That's my favorite way to apply that. It is absolutely stunning. It's beautiful. The color, the quality, the sheen, the reflectivity, it's just absolutely stunning. You can't, the quality is amazing. So try it. Your mileage may vary, as we say, but try it. You'll be surprised what you get. So Deidre, she says, a book list would be nice in general. I was looking on Kindle yesterday, found very little. Chemical Pictures is available. Like, are you talking about a book list? Like, we're going to jump in here in a minute to Barrett's book. I would be more than happy to publish my bibliography, my graduate resource list. It's long, it's extensive, and it's got some really, really great books in it and movies that I think you guys might find. You send me an email, I'll remember to do that. I'll publish that for you. And it's got a lot of great resources, all the classics, in photography kind of thing, but then some real gems. One of the book we're going to look at right here in a minute, Criticizing Photographs, kind of the overview of it, is a great book conceptually to start. If you want to learn how to talk, you know, in the right environment, of course. If you want to learn how to talk and how to criticize, make formal expressions about what you're seeing in photography, it's a great book. So I'll do that. That's a great comment. I appreciate that. Hey, John, good to see you, brother. What's the rinse procedure for the field photography? That's the great, another great one, kind of piggybacking on Samuel's question. My procedure is that I use KCN, and I know a lot of people do not want to use potassium cyanide, and that's perfectly fine. But in the field, I've said this before, I take 10 plates out. I hope to get 1 or 2 plates that are successful. I take usually 20 liters of water, more or less, 20, 25 liters of water. If you're using one of the thiosulfates, sodium or ammonium, you're going to have to probably use the glycerin water combination. Keep them wet so they don't dry out, because you run the risk of putting a plate, and if they're glass, if it's aluminum, ferrotypes, plastic, don't worry about this. You can let them dry out and put them back in the water, no problem. But if they're on glass, and especially if they're not albuminized, you're going to have to keep them wet. So use that 50-50 glycerin, bring them back home, wash that off, and wash them in running water for a half an hour. It's really impossible, to be honest with you, to get a good archival wash on glass in the field for these images. You just don't have enough water. Unless you have a stream or something, you can put them in, right? They used to do that back in the day. But at the end of the day, you're probably going to have to bring them back to your studio and wash them. That's a great question, though. Yes, I'll publish a book list on my Facebook group. I will do that, Jan. I'll put it in chemical pictures for you guys that have that. That's a great way to do that. Eric, how you doing, brother? Can you prevent some of that drying collodion pre-silver bath by cooling down the collodion? It's not the temperature of the collodion, although you don't want that hot. What it is, it's basically your ether content. Your ether is going to pull right off. You can see when you pour a plate, if you look close, you can see the ether coming off, evaporating off the plate. It'll drop down. It'll go down. It's heavier than oxygen, so it drops down. But it's that ether, and it's a critical part of that too, right? You do want it to dry. You don't want it to stay wet. But you can see that pulling off. So the temperature, you're always going to have, once you pour collodion on a plate, that collodion has about 70% ether in there. It's going to cool that plate off tremendously. You don't want to pour it on hot plates. If you've had your aluminum or your glass sitting in the sun and it's hot and you pour that on there, that's going to create another different problem. But the temperature, actual temperature of the collodion, it's not going to make a big difference. What's going to make a difference in the plate drying out, that time from you pulling, it's not really after you pull it out of the silver. You'd have to go many, many minutes. It's the time you pour the plate, drain it, and get it into your bath. That's when you start drying out. If you pour the plate, you sit and you drain it, and then you're talking, and it's draining, you're talking, and you don't get it in that bath, you're going to start seeing that dry down. Sometimes you can work as fast as you want, and you're at 10 or 15% humidity in a very dry, warm area. You're going to have to increase that alcohol in your collodion a little bit, because that water will keep that collodion wet a little bit longer. That's really how you want to kind of balance that. So yes, good, Karsten, and yes, Deidre, I will post that up. Jan had a good comment. I'll put that in my picture. So what we have here is we have, let's put this one up from John again. Yeah, no problem, John. I'm happy to answer anything we have, or I can. We use KCN too, but every now and then we have a situation where it'd be good to have options. Been using Ilford. Yep. Yeah, lots of, yeah. Here's the thing. When you're making plates with any of the thiosulfates, those bind up with the silver, right? They remove it, right? And this is a very technical term. They're sticky. They want to hang on to in the collodion on the plate in the silver, bind up with the silver, kind of like albumin, kind of any print, right? That paint kind of holds it. Not collodion chloride, that's kind of a plastic. but any of that paper will kind of bind it up. Those thiosulfates, it takes quite a bit of rinsing and washing to get those out. Where KCN, if you think about it, binds up with the silver, takes it out, takes it off the plate, and then on the surface it washes off really easy. That's why a 5-minute tray, no agitation. I mean, you could switch it out once. Your plate's washed. It's archival. It's totally good. So be careful of that, because if you really have a special work or work that you want to keep, and I hope it's all of it, but if you're on a commission job or you're working on a project and you've driven 8 or 10 hours to get there, or an hour even, whatever it is, and you don't wash those plates well enough, you're going to regret that in a month or 6 months or a year from now, when you can't print that anymore, or it doesn't look good, or you start having a problem. Yes, HypoClear. Jan says, can you use HypoClear when you water rinse and then in the field? Yes, you can. I haven't experimented a lot with HypoClear, but that's another, punch agent that will help pull that off, just like prints, right? You always run that risk with that thiosulfate, though. You always run that risk. It's fine. It's no problem. I'm not saying don't use it. I'm just saying be cautious when you do use it, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to deal with that archival issue, or wanting to have those prints or plates hang around. And it goes for prints as well, too.
Hey, Quinn.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Hello, Thomas.
So I'm always on the road when I shoot, and I usually only shoot about 4 plates at a time.
Okay.
What I've done, you can see this, I picked up at a local, big store here, and then it pops off, and what I have are these 5x7 print holders that I got at Container Store. I drilled holes in those that basically line up, and then have a couple of holes in the bottom of each, or in the ends. This, I fill this up with water. One of these jugs fills it up. And then when I put each one of my plates in there, I close this up, it goes to my floorboard. The chambers of these baffles the agitation of the water, so it doesn't lift any. It keeps the water moving. I can then stop if I am out driving around. I stop, and I can dump out 90% of this without any of the plates flipping forward. I throw another jug of water in it, put it back in my floorboard, and keep on trucking. And
that is awesome, Thomas. That is great. Thanks for sharing that. That's an advanced technique over the plastic containers Jan and I were talking about last week. That is wonderful stuff. You've got it down. Find ways to work with the chemicals you feel good about, still get the quality of the image and the archivability, because that, at the end of the day, that's really important. We can't stress that enough. You go spend all that time and resource to make images. You don't want them to go away in 6 months or a year. That's a great solution for that. So keep that in mind.
And I have time then to put it in my rinse, in my tray, in my sink.
Yeah, you're getting your wash on the way home. John's asking if that box is pretty watertight. It looks like it's pretty watertight, right? Yeah, looks pretty watertight. Yeah, hold that in there. You're muted. There you go.
Yeah, I fill it right up to the brim with one of these bottles with these all in here, and this pops right on.
Perfect.
It's a good seal. It rides in the floorboard, and I've never had a leak out of it.
Perfect. That's great. A great solution, guys. That's what you want to see. You want to find people that have worked out these problems. And if you don't use KCN, if you don't want to use a glycerin water mixture, I hesitate. I've said this a few times on these broadcasts. I hesitate to tell people to add more gear to the process. It seems like we already have a ton of gear, but those are great solutions if you're not using the chemicals or compounds you don't feel secure or safe with, or whatever the reason is, it doesn't matter. Those are great solutions. Thomas is really killing 2 birds with 1 stone. He's washing the plates as he goes home, and he's keeping everything nice and tight if he wants to redevelop, if he wants whatever he wants to do. So those are great solutions for that. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Well, it prevents the fish gill, as you're talking about, the agitation.
There you go. Yeah.
It's not going to lift that collodion off because the water's just not hitting it.
Yes, exactly. That's another good point, Thomas. You're right. Because if you have, and I've had these in the free boxes, in the sandwich boxes, right, or whatever, the lunch boxes, the little plastic things, as that water swishes around as you're driving around, that can agitate and lift that up. And what he's done, as you saw, he's prevented that by containing those, putting holes in there. You still get the circulation, but you don't get that rough agitation. What was the box originally marketed as, Thomas, that box you have? What was that originally for? John's asking.
Oh, it's this was on the shelf at Walmart.
Oh, well, there you go. Easy enough.
I mean, it's just probably for flour or something.
Ah, yeah.
The Container Store, I know you can get these 5x7. You can get them in different sizes. They're just film storage boxes for 5x7s.
Perfect.
And they sell them in 4 or 5, or you can buy them individually.
There you go.
It fits just perfectly to hold these, and I can go in there and I just let them float down in the water. I don't push them down.
Yep.
But the plates will they sit in there. I just lock.
Voila. Perfect.
Box and just let it sink. Put the lid on and keep trucking.
There you go. That's awesome. Those are great. Yes, that's super. Awesome. Good job. Thanks for sharing that again. Yes, Jan, HypoClear will reduce the fix, and it's better for archive. You're right. That's very true, just like film and anything else. So if you have a combination of these things, kind of a hybrid, Thomas's solution or plastic boxes or glycerin or HypoClear, you can figure all that out. Find something that works for you, that you're comfortable with using, that actually works and preserves your image. And there's no wrong answer here. There just isn't. Deidre says, Troy and I have been wondering if you should wait for the silver bath to clear after adding water before sensitizing a plate. So this is wonderful. I was just having a conversation last night, online, of course, with, I forget his name now. Sorry. I was having a conversation about pinholes. He has pinholes in his plates. Pinholes are caused from way too much iodides in your bath. When you add water, the silver will turn milky blue. You can get rid of that by adding more silver. It'll suck it up. Or you add that, let those iodides fall out, put it in the sun, let it aerate. What that means, Deidre, is you have added water to a bath, heavy in iodides, which it should be, but those are precipitated out of the solution, and you shouldn't try to sensitize a plate in that. You either need to add some more silver nitrate to that and clear that, or you need to put it out in the sun, let that precipitate, that organic material come out of it and fall to the bottom, that black stuff, filter it, then use it. So yeah, you shouldn't, when you add water, here's what you do. You have a bath, let's say 1,000 mils, a liter, and you notice after a session, oh, I'm down a couple of 100 mils or 150 mils of water or silver bath. I'm down to 800 or 850 on my bath. I want to top that off. And if you've been using that bath for a while, you dump distilled water in that bath to top it off to 1,000 mils, that'll probably turn milky blue. That'll get foggy and turn milky blue. That's precipitating those iodides out of the bath. What you want to do is you want to take the water you need to add, and let's say it's 100 mils, you want to add 9 grams of silver, 8.5 or 9 grams of silver to that 100 mils of water, and then top your bath off. It won't pull that out. It'll be full. It won't pull those iodides out. So if you have those kinds of issues, pre-treat that water with 8 grams, 100 mils, right? 8%, 9%, 8 grams, 8.5 grams of water. Some people have a 10% bath on hand. they just top their used bath off with that. They're down 800. They put 200 mils of the 10% in. I like to go a little more conservative. I like a little less silver in my bath and more silver. So either way you do it, that's how you prevent it. And no, you should not sensitize a plate in the milky blue bath. It's common. I know everybody runs into it, but that's kind of the gist of it for having that kind of problem. Because people say, wait a minute, Quinn, you say you need to you iodize your bath. You make a silver bath, you have to put a plate in there, let it sit and fill up with iodides. Now you're telling me I have too many iodides? Yeah, there's kind of a balance there. When you cross a threshold, it usually takes a long time to do this, a bath that's very used. When you cross a threshold, you'll start getting iodides literally in the bath that precipitate out, fall on the plate, and create little tiny pinholes. They'll be clear on glass, they'll be black on aluminum, whatever. They'll create little tiny pinholes, and they'll be uniform all over the plate. That's when you have to take it out of 30-year distilled water. It'll turn blue, let it sun and aerate, evaporate some of that water off, filter it, add your silver back in, and your bath's back up. You can use baking soda or ammonia or something if you want to bring that to neutralize it if you have pinholes. But yeah,
Quinn,
I'm happy to answer.
I did that this morning.
What's that,
and
Thomas?
I did a sunning yesterday because I was having some, what I figured was iodides getting in there and pinholing.
Yeah.
So I put it out in a tray and sunned it again. I sunned it recently, but I put it out there. But once I went back in and filtered it, and then I hit my hydrometer on it, I was way too heavy on the silver. It had evaporated a lot of water. So I did take distilled water and started adding back in 20 milliliters at a time until I got back to my hydrometer setting. But I did notice, in one of them that it was starting to turn a little blue, and I thought, well, I wonder if I need to resun it now, or how do I get?
And you can do that. Those iodides will precipitate out really easy with distilled water. That's what you're doing. You're pulling those out. So if you have over iodized stuff, you precipitate that out with the water. Then you can sun it and aerate out. It'll clear out, evaporate off. And see, Thomas brought up a unique problem. He's now evaporated silver off, so he can't pre-add his 200 mils and put 16 grams of silver in there to add back. He doesn't want any more silver in that, right? You'd have to make a bigger bath. So he had to add it slowly. You can do that, but it'll pull them out. If you just a turn of the wrist, you're going to pull them out. Don't freak out if it turns cloudy and blue. Put it back out in the sun. In fact, that's a good thing. You'll pull those out. Check it again. Get your silver content right. Get your pH right. Your pH is important. And make sure you give a nose test and make sure those solvents are evaporated out. That's why you want to aerate that bath. That's why I recommend a big glass cookie jar with a big wide top. I see people aerating their silver in little tiny topped bottles like this, and that it's not enough. You need to dump that out in a big aerating jar so it can breathe. You want to evaporate all that alcohol and ether off as much as you can. So give it a sniff test. Check your silver content with your hydrometer and check your pH and make sure you're all in line. Your silver bath is, man, that's the heartbeat of this process, right? That's where that double decomposition happens. Everything else relies on that. The iodides, how the developer works, how the iodides are working, all that kind of dances together. And it's really important that you take care of that. So super stuff. Awesome. Good, great questions today. Wonderful stuff. Thanks for sharing all that too. Let's go back here. I want to, if you guys hang with me for a minute, give me just a second and see if I can interest you in this. If I can't, we'll blow through it. But I want to give you a chance to, if you haven't, and maybe some of you have, probably a lot of you that have studied photography or have been interested in photography on kind of an academic level, you might, this material may be very familiar to you, and please chime in. There are no right or wrong answers, even though I might sound like I'm trying to preach gospel here. I'm really not. There are no right or wrong answers. I just want to give you an idea about Barrett's book or Barrett's book, I don't know how you pronounce his last name, Terry Barrett. His book is kind of an overview of criticizing photographs. And one of the things that I see happening in photography today, we're making photographs, that's great. And specifically, this is to the wet plate collodion process. We're making photographs, that's great. We're sharing them. We have these great platforms to share them on now, social media, websites, all this stuff. That's wonderful. People are getting to see work they've never been able to see before. The problem on the other side of that great thing, the negative side, that two-edged sword sort of thing, is that we're not talking about these photographs. We're not talking about interpreting them, describing them, theorizing about them. We're not really getting what the intention and the creator and if we're talking about a narrative piece, we're not really getting that message. Kind of like when you buy a Sally Mann book, or kind of when you pick up a Frank book or a Richard Avedon book or something like this. There's a narrative there. There's a story there. There's things that make sense and unfold, kind of like a book or a movie. We're not having those conversations. We're having conversations about what kind of collodion did you use and what kind of lens is that? Did you use a strobe light or did you use natural light? And those are all fine and good. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Those are great conversations to have. But we're leaving out the other conversations. We're leaving out the conceptual parts and the why questions. Why did you make that photograph? What is this story about? Tell me about this photograph. Those kinds of things. We're not having those conversations. So that's the idea behind what I'm going to present here. And Deidre, I just want to close up this technical. Deidre said, yes, that's exactly what we did. I think it evaporates while sunning. It's very dry in Phoenix. Yes, very hot and dry in Phoenix. Yes, I saw you guys are really, 114 degrees Fahrenheit down there. Oh my God, I don't know. And here I am, I'm sitting up here. The high today is 20 degrees, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. It's just, the mountains are wonderful. Anyway, so let's go back over to this. And I just want to share, if you guys just cannot stand this, let me know, and we'll move on to the next part of this. So again, this is from the book, Criticizing Photographs, based on Terry Barrett's book. Barrett, I don't know how you say his last name, like I said, but these are observations. Now, this book isn't perfect. I'm not saying this is gospel. I have issues with it in different ways, but this is kind of the gist of it. And any of you Neil Young fans out there, you know this. There's more to the picture that meets the eye. Hey, hey, my. You know that song. That's a great tune. So the gist of this is what we're talking about, criticizing photographs. The word criticize is always taken out of context. We don't want the first definition indicating the faults of someone or something in a disapproving way. We want the second one. Form and express a sophisticated judgment of an artistic work. That's the one we want. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about criticizing photographs. So here's the basis of it. Morris Weitz or Weitz, he was a philosopher, an aesthetic philosopher, if you will. And these are, if you get anything out of it, this is probably one of the more important slides I have here. If you get anything out of it, this is what we want to do. We want to describe the work. We want to interpret the work. We want to evaluate the work, and then we want to theorize about the work. And I'll describe these briefly each so you get it. John chimed in, though. He said, I believe a lot of people who comment on photos don't even have a general clue on how to read. There you go. This is exactly what we're talking about, John. Read a photograph to begin with. For instance, I make a lot of images that are philosophical in nature. Yes, not so pretty, so people tend to come up, yep. Negative reply. God, I wish I could post that. Or won't even engage with to begin with. And these are supposed to be photographers. I believe this is the biggest reason we do photography to begin with. So I don't really understand why people don't study the art of reading. This is exactly what we're talking about here, John. Those are great comments. And I know you're educated in photography, so this will probably be review, or I hope I can add something to it. But for those of you that are academic or have formal training or have degrees in photography, this is just going to be oh, here we go with Photo 101, Quinn lecturing on Photo 101. But this, I want to make this more informal, as friends, as people working, peers working in a process that's a little difficult to understand sometimes, that gets a lot of attention with very little context and sometimes negative attention, like John's saying. I say, if you can't read a photograph, don't dare think about criticizing. No, I think you're right. And I think you're going to see that I hope I make a pretty good case for that in this little slideshow. John's very adept at this as well too. Yeah, amateurs worry about gear, professionals worry about money, masters worry about light. I love it. Boom. Very good. Those are great comments. Oh, Mohammed, I will get to that. I will not forget your technical question there. I will get to that. But I got to continue or I'll lose my train of thought here. So White's analysis framework. Describe it, interpret it, evaluate it, and theorize about it. Let's talk about those real quick. And I sort of got to try not to bore you here. Description. Description in, you can read this, but in a couple of words, is a factual report or context, okay? A factual report, you're just describing what you see. The formal properties, what its visual characteristics. The medium, how is it made? What tools, techniques, and materials, and in what its style, what the subject matter is and how it's presented. These, as you can see, are very, very important because we work in wet collodion, so these all matter. The formal properties, right? The medium, right there, boom. How it was made, what tools, techniques, and materials. I talk about this extensively in my presentation on my work about how collodion informs my work. I'm not a process photographer. I don't make photographs because of the process. I use the process to inform the work. So I kind of flip that on its head a little bit. And you have to describe that. You have to talk about that. So the description is very important. And then the style. What's the subject matter? How is it presented, etc. Very, very straightforward stuff. Interpretation. He uses multiple critics and examples and different methods of how to interpret a photograph. This is what John was just talking about. Here's a little caveat. Each critic or each person brings their own experience and worldview to each act of interpretation. So as we get through this, we'll describe that just a little bit more. Evaluate. To place a photograph in a category and show that it fits in a strong sense, right? So it's almost going back and tying into description. It's readable, going to John's comment. You can start, it's like a roadmap. You're figuring out what road you take, what exits, what signs you're looking for, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. So we figure out what it does best, or how it's most clearly being used. Those are really important things. And then theory. This, and I'm not going to read all of this. I'll just hit it. But the principles for interpreting or theorizing about photographs, they're constructed obviously by your environment, your intention, and your knowledge. And I think going back to John's comment again, and what I was saying in the beginning, we lack a lot of this in not only just wet collodion, but in art in general. And then you pack wet collodion on top of that, it even becomes more complex in a way because of the materials, because it's very different and highly attractive to people. It complicates things. If I can say it this way, and I hesitate to say this publicly, but I will, a lot of times people, photographers, artists get way ahead of themselves with wet collodion because they produce things that they're not ready to be able to talk about, if that makes sense at all. Photographs have intrinsic and extrinsic properties, right? So keeping in mind intrinsic property, the object or thing itself, the artifact, has qualities independent of other external things. And then extrinsically, the property depends on things in relationship to other things. So I know that sounds very complex and complicated, but it's really not. The artifact itself has qualities and properties that are unique regardless of the context of it. And then it has extrinsic qualities, how it connects to other things in our world or outside our world. An extrinsic property is a property that depends on things relationship with other things. It makes sense, right? Critics have their own biases, knowledge, facility with language. Facility with language means comprehension. Going back to John's comment again, you need to be able to understand. I talk about this a little bit in the Dunning-Kruger effect we have going on today, right? A lot of people have dropped the science and just depend on other people's opinions online, and you know, the kid that dropped out of high school is a science expert now, that kind of stuff. There's a whole bunch of problems in the art world, and always has been. This is nothing new, but understanding relationships of these points, what makes a good interpretation, plausible, convincing, and informative, those kinds of things. So that's kind of the principle of theory. In his book, this book we're talking about, he uses Mapplethorpe's, and if you're familiar with this work, you'll understand what this means. I just say, I wonder if the backlash to Mapplethorpe would not have been as severe if these images had been paintings rather than photographs. Is photography criticism different from other types of art criticism? That's a question to ponder a little bit, because again, we're in a unique situation where, and we're not even talking about wet collodion here, we're talking about photography in general. But you know, when you paint, here's a great example of what I posted there. You can put up a Renaissance nude painting, or Renaissance. I'm thinking of there's tons of these. But nudity in general, painting is fairly acceptable. But if you do nudity in photography, it becomes a different thing. They're just questions to ponder there about how we criticize or how we evaluate different mediums. Yeah, who needs theories of photography? Do photographers, critics, curators, collectors, historians, photography teachers? Theories of photography guides practices, and practices of photography influence theory. But are theories necessary? Photographers could make images for random reasons or no reason at all. Critics could criticize photographs based on their idiosyncratic impulses. Collectors could collect whatever suits their fancy and budget at any given moment. Historians could canonize any image they like for any reason or no reason. And photography teachers could teach whatever they individually believe their students should know about the medium, and perhaps show some randomly selected images from the past, or ignore photography history altogether. So this is what I'm talking about right here. The first slide and this slide. If you take these two things, you'll understand what I'm saying. There are guidelines here. It's not gospel, they're guidelines about being able, if we want to grow as artists, as photographers, if we want to understand ourselves better and the world we live in and our relationship, our worldview to all that, I believe we need to be able to talk about the work we make, have other people criticize or talk about it, defend our work. These words are really different. Criticize and defend sounds like you're sitting in a courtroom, right? We need to look at those words as general in general terms. Criticizing and defending. We talked about just criticizing, giving an expression of something you're seeing and using your worldview to talk about that, and then defending the work, the artist or photographer making the work being able to describe and talk about why they made this work. And we'll talk about that in just a second here, going over that. But I think it's important. The photography influencing theory, the guides and practices. There are reasons we make photographs, and I think it's important we were able to talk about that and then have others criticize or talk about the work itself. Here, I just included this out of the book because it's kind of the modernist approach. I think I talk about that in a minute, but if the photograph's reality base is compromised, realists fear that the photograph's truth value is weakened or lost altogether. John was just talking about this. I have a big thing about truth, capital T, and little truth, and all these kinds of things. Is photography real? Here it is. For conventionalists, the introduction of computer technology into photography is not alarming, but merely a continuation of practices that artists and photographers have invented and used throughout history to make expressive photographs. I think that makes sense, right? I mean, some people think it's alarming. Non-conventionalists think it's alarming, and people think I have that theory, but I don't. Here's another idea we can talk about. Discrepancies continue between prices for what are identified as photographs versus the prices of a photograph, images designated as artworks. You as a photojournalist working for a newspaper might get paid a certain amount of money for, you know, your feature picture versus maybe John or I working on a project and using a more artistic approach, if you will, and questions arise about the context of the photograph. And he's talking about here prices, actual money. Here we go. Modernists believe that the straight photograph to be the embodiment of what photography does best. Modernist prints are precious, signed, numbered, and archivally processed. Think about that for just a minute. What is a modernist? You know, late 19th century, early 20th century kind of thing going on. We move from this, you know, documentarian, revealing truth to this kind of artistic, precious, like he said, signed, numbered, and archivally processed kind of image making. They're interesting ideas and theories to think about. We assume photographs need no interpreters because most of us have experience with interpreting what we see in the world. Again, what John wrote in his question or his comment there, that's what people are doing. We do it whether they have knowledge or not. That's what they're interpreting. They have experience, whether it's good or bad. We do it every day just by walking around. Criticizing photographs reminds us that the photograph of the thing is not the thing, and gives us a basic vocabulary to use when talking about photographs beyond I like it or I don't like it. And you've got to have, that's the vocabulary we're talking about. You've got to have that, be able to talk about beyond why you like it or why you don't like it, and be informed, legitimately informed about what we're talking about, right? Why do you like it? Why don't you like it? What is that based on? Is it based on, you know, historical context? Is it based on contemporary context? Is it based on what your uncle told you? You know, what is it that we're talking about here? Because it's really important. Context is king. Jan says, yes, it's a good idea to set the title before you take the photo, then compose and build up around what you want to tell or give the engagement. For example, storytelling, mood, feeling. Yes. Oh, good. John's got the book. Awesome. That's great. Yeah, you should read that. I don't agree with everything in it, John. I'm just using this as kind of a guideline. There are really good pieces in the book that you can use. I tried to pick out a few of them here today, but let's go back to Jan's comment about you should set the title. I don't know necessarily if you should set the title, but I agree you should have some kind of roadmap. And this is what I want to talk about right now. Making a body of work. I thought to jump off Barrett's book, criticizing photographs we just talked about, to making a body of work, and body of work, especially in what collodion. And I came up with these 4 topics: subject matter, technical approach, semiotics, and writing. And some of them overlap one another, but let's just talk about these real quickly. Subject matter. How do you determine the subject matter, and what criteria are you using? In other words, what is your work going to be about, and where do you get the idea for that work? Why is that work going to be about that particular subject matter? And can you talk about that subject matter? what experience or expertise you have in that subject, or personal experience or expertise you have in that, what academic training you might have, what professional experience you might have, whatever the connection is. And how do you lay that criteria out? Those are rhetorical questions, right? I can't answer them for you. It's like trying to answer what's your favorite ice cream is. I don't know what flavor, or even if you even eat ice cream, right? So I can't answer those questions. I'm just putting these rhetorical questions out there. The technical approach. What variant are you going to use in what plate? Are you going to use positives or negatives? What format and why? Every question after has a why. What variant and why? What format and why? What kind of lighting and why? What kind of processing and why? And what's the end product and why? So now we have the subject matter, we have the technical approach, now we have semiotics. Semiotics, semology, if you will, like semantics, words and images, like the meaning of images or symbols, right? Semiotics. Are your images readable? And I don't just mean like, oh, I can tell that's a piece of corn and a trumpet and a calculator. I'm talking about, are they readable in the context of your subject matter and your technical approach? Can you understand them in that context? Are your images arranged in narrative form? I should say in your narrative form. Again, this all kind of piggybacks on the former questions. Is your project, is your body of work, is your story stacking up? So it's like a book, right? You have a middle, a beginning, a middle, and an end, or a movie or a song. You have lyrics, chorus, whatever it is. Is it stacking up right? Is it arranged in a proper narrative form? And how do you determine that, right? What protocols or methodology are you using to determine that? And do your image support both the technical and the written narrative? Meaning, you see these, and pardon the French, but you see these kind of bullshit artist statements that use these big words and these $20, $30 words describing this. It's just BS. It's a sure sign that this person didn't have anything to say about the work, and their statement and their work is just butting heads tremendously bad. Or they had someone they quote respected help them write this narrative or the statement for the work, and it's fluffy and engaging. And a lot of times people use words to scare people away from challenging them about the images. So there's this whole art speak thing that people use to kind of smoke and mirrors, kind of push them away from the imagery. I think it actually hurts the images a lot, or the body. It could be a nice body of work that you really want to know the intention and context behind from the artist, and they write this BS statement about, lusciously gray and the ephemeral qualities and, all these kind of artistic BS fluffy stuff. And then finally, the writing. Is it authentic? Is it well written? Not too long? And most of all, is it understandable? Going back, piggybacking on all of this, you really need to be able to communicate authentically. And if you're not a good writer, absolutely have someone help you write your statement. Have someone help, or learn how to write, even better, learn how to write. But if you can't, or you don't, have someone help you with that, and make sure, even the basic stuff, spelling and grammar, punctuation, all those things can turn people off. Great body of work. You read the statement, it's fluffy BS, or it's poorly written, grammatically incorrect, punctuation's terrible, whatever it is, can turn people off. So, and most of all, is it cohesive? Does it make sense? And that's the most difficult thing to do, because you want to have some poetic license, and you can take that, right? You can say, hey, I don't care if people even get these subtleties in this, but is the story interesting, right? And you're not trying to attract everybody. Most people couldn't care less if you made the photographs or did the work. Honestly, they couldn't care less. But those that do, it will mean something to, and all these other components will matter a lot. So you don't want to alienate the people that would care about your work by having some fault in these other areas. And this is kind of what these are, again, this isn't gospel. This isn't gospel. It's just my opinion. I was just reading the comments. I have a few books to share with the group whenever there's a good time to. Please do. Please share the books. Absolutely. I can write.
Do so right now.
Really well. There you go.
You like that last one?
I do. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Might have to be $15 a word after that mishap.
Throw a ephemeral or something in there, John. You know the routine.
Right. All right. Let's see here. How do I make this a little bit bigger for the group? So
let me see if I can help you out here.
I don't know.
Hold on just 1 second here. I'll stop that for just a second. And I'll go into here. There we go.
Okay. So here's one that we used in college. Actually, there you go. Liz Wells.
Okay, great.
Photography reader. So it talks about everything from like semiotics and everything like that on down. Sections include reflections on photography, photographic scene codes, rhetoric, photography in the postmodern, photodigital, documentary photojournalism, photographic gaze, all that stuff. So this is actually a very, very good book if anybody's interested.
Absolutely.
It's a college level kind of stuff, but it really goes into detail.
Awesome.
Let's see here. There's a few more here. Storytellers.
Great.
Pretty damn good one for
Jared Fisher.
Stories with pictures. Let's see here. This is a little bit less important, but photographer's eye.
Yep.
It's good for getting some ideas and stuff, but this one's by Michael Freeman. So if you want to take a look at that.
Was that last book that you held up, Storyteller, John? Is that last book by Jared Fisher, the Storyteller book?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Jared Foster.
Foster. Okay, great. Yeah. Just so they have the names in case they want to look these up.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Sorry, my bad. And then one that doesn't have to do with photography, but modern design, which is history of modern design. I think these kinds of things are really, really important.
Definitely.
Overall, I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're a photographer or not. But
nope.
I mean, especially if you're a photographer, I think that's super important to at least get some ideas. I mean, there's some really, really excellent content in this book, and believe it or not, it really inspired a lot of my current work and how it ends up. So, Jim, there you go.
Awesome. We appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. That is really good stuff. And that's the thing. You come on here, share some stuff. I don't have all the answers. I'm just sharing what my experience has been. It's not gospel. It's just, I have an education. I have a terminal degree in the arts. I know clearly that influence is incessant, and it's just not one photography lane. It's philosophy, it's movies, it's reading, it's modern design books, it's architecture, it's all kinds of music, it's all kinds of things that influence us, and we got to be open to that. And you'll grow. Your work will be whatever medium you work in will be much stronger if you allow external influences to come in and study those and read about how books are written, how sculptures are made, or make sculptures, or paint, or draw, or write, whatever it is that can help your photography grow. That will definitely do that. I actually have a Master of Fine Arts in interdisciplinary art. That's what my degree is in. My emphasis was in wet collodion or 19th century historic photographic processes. But when I share my bibliography, when I share my thesis, my workbook or my reading list on my forum on Facebook, you'll see my influences are tremendously wide. I mean, it's not just, photography that way. I mean, I shared Barrett's book today because it's just a kind of a general framework to get an idea how to approach, even to begin to approach. It's something this book is something you'd probably read in your sophomore year at university, like at undergraduate school, first, second year, maybe third year, probably second year American. That's what you'd probably approach it from if you were in like second level courses or something. So those are just ideas, and I appreciate you guys sharing that, John, sharing that with us. John, why don't you get in here and share some of your books, brother? You're muted. I can't unmute you.
Some of my books. Wow, I'm gonna have to get back to me on that one.
I thought you wanted to share some.
No, I didn't have anything.
Oh, sorry. Who told me that? Hold on. Oh, John. Oh, sorry. That's the other John. John, you just said sorry. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot, brother. John, get in here and share something. It's like, oh my God, I don't have anything right now. Now I know John has some things, but the other John number 2. So that's good. Good stuff. Yeah, man, share something. Absolutely share. This is what it's all about. We do not live in a vacuum, so to speak. Let's go back. I have one more thing here. Share screen. I'll share this with you. Chrome tab. Boom. And let's go. So boom. So here's a new film, newer film called Collodion, Process of Preservation by Eric Overton. He sent me this email. He said, Quinn, thought you'd be interested in seeing our finished film. Thank you for all your support over the years. Eric came to Denver. God, it was several years ago. I don't even know what year, 12 or 13 maybe. I have a lot of respect and gratitude for what you helped me find. Please share with anyone you think would be interesting in living a bit slower and more connected. Here's the link. So you can watch this free on Amazon. I thought we'd pull this up and just watch the trailer. I'll pull the trailer up here. I think you guys will be able to see it and hear it. Can I share it full screen? I think so. Yeah.
It is. Let's go. We're running out of light. Do you like this?
Yeah.
I think that's really nice.
All that you put in.
Not playing on for me, Quinn.
Time. And
no audio?
And sweat.
I'm not seeing any video. I hear the audio fine. Can anybody else see the video?
Yeah, audio is good, just no video.
Oh.
No video.
Really?
Whether we perceive
let's do this. Sorry.
Entity is destroyed.
I know what it is.
Or vice versa.
I'm going to stop share.
Their shoes. You shouldn't have an opinion on it.
Here we go. Here it is. Let's start it again. Can you see it now?
Yes.
It is.
Good.
Let's go. We're running out of light. Do you like this?
Yeah.
I think that's really nice.
All that you put in time and effort and sweat, you do feel a protection for it.
Whether we perceive that one entity is destroying the land more than the other, or vice versa, until you walk a mile in their shoes, you shouldn't have an opinion on it.
It's kind of a funny idea of preservation. Take the best part of it and destroy it.
When we're not experiencing wildness and exploring and discovering and having that reverence for life, we stand to lose everything.
I hate speaking for everybody. I don't like doing it. But it's necessary to get as many voices as possible. It's not just us.
The collodion process was used to take portraits, but a photograph could not stop time.
Just follow my steps, okay?
We need to spend a good amount of time washing this with water, though, so that it stays preserved.
What's preserved mean?
It means we can save it, and it doesn't change.
Getting people to talk one with another is a huge, huge challenge. With all these diverse opinions, and everybody has a view about land.
I don't care which side of the issue you're on, we all love the land. We want to preserve it at a certain level. We forget the fact that our homes were built on land that other people may have wanted to preserve at one time.
What happens when all we are left with
There it is. So I encourage you to go to Amazon and watch that. You can watch it for free. He's a great guy. He's actually a medical doctor as well, believe it or not. And he just absolutely fell head over heels in love with his process. Because again, when you're not just a process photographer, when you're using this to inform a concept or an idea that you have, or a passion or something heavy on your heart or your head, this medium can use properly or correctly in this context, can just deliver your message, your story, your narrative, whatever you want to get out there. So I put this together today. I spent a little time, not too much, but a little time on the slides putting them together. And I hope it guided these conversations a little bit better. I would actually like to have more conversations, share more, have more people come in. I was even thinking about maybe inviting guests to come in or have conversations with people. I mean, I surely don't need to be the center of attention. I don't mind orchestrating and trying to get conversations going and doing technical stuff. I'm cool with all that. But at the end of the day, I think the important part is we're able to get something out of this and not just have kind of rambling nonsense. And I think I ramble quite a bit sometimes. So, John M says, if people like this, be sure to also watch Mile and a Half, a group of artists hike the John Muir Trail. Oh, cool. I'll look for that. A little similar, but nice film. Need to watch again. Different artists experience. Yes, I totally agree. Different methods.
Digital photography. I think that the digital photographer and a musician, an audio technician.
Cool.
But it's nothing like we do. But it's still the whole process, right?
Yeah, it's that's the thing. I hate getting hung up on. Oh, they don't work in collodion. I'm not interested. God, I've seen film and listened to music and watched artists work that do sculpture and painting, and that totally just changed my approach in what I do and how I think and how it informs my worldview. And that's what we're after. And that's what Deidre just said. I'll just put it up here. All my creative interests inspire each other. Absolutely. That's really important. I love these conversations. I do too. I love to hear people see things, share things. I love it. Troy and I have them often. I look forward to viewing the films. Thanks for sharing. Good. I hope you guys enjoy it. Eric's a great guy. I wanted to put that out there and just, watch it when you have a couple of hours and you're interested in seeing what he does. Mohammed missed the technical. We'll go back on this for just a second so we can answer this. My varnish still melts my plate. What can I do? Let's back up and talk about, we're back at the technical Q&A, which is perfectly fine. What Mohammed's saying is he pours his varnish on his collodion plate and the image just dissolves away. What that means is his collodion, the nitrocellulose, is old. It's broken down. Probably a highly iodized collodion, probably leaning more in red area. And his varnish with that alcohol, 95, 96%, is too strong for that nitrocellulose, so it melts the image away. Mohammed, what you can do is you can take, and I say 250 milliliters, and you can adjust accordingly. If you have 250 milliliters of gum sand direct varnish or any varnish, add 10 drops of distilled water to that. Take that same collodion, make an image, do a test image, pour the varnish on. If it still melts it, add another 10 drops. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get the water content high enough to take the alcohol strength down a little bit. And so it doesn't melt that nitrocellulose or basically that plastic off of there. It's easy to fix. It just takes a little time because sometimes people have 500 or 1,000 mils of this collodion that they just can't, their varnish just dissolves the image away. So make a couple of plates that you can test on and add water to your varnish until it stops melting your image away. That should probably do it. So that's what I had today, guys. That's my my entire ball of wax, my dog and pony show, so to speak. So if you have anything else you want to add or say or do, I'm game. But at the end of the day, I think that wraps it up for me. Oh, can collodion come from a bad batch? Raw. Jan, I have only seen that one time in the mid 2000s here in America. Mike at Artcraft got some collodion that would turn, once you added the salts to it and the additional solvents, would turn a pink color, would turn pink just immediately. And what we found out, and if you look at how collodion's made, if they don't wash all the sulfuric acid out of it, if there's any acid left in that raw collodion will be bad. That's the first and only batch I've ever seen in almost 20 years that actually had residue, raw collodion that was no good, destroy kind of our community. And everybody was dealing with this pink collodion. And that's what it would do. It would turn pink right after you mixed it together. So, okay, John says, I don't know that ether can be, ether can. Oh, ether. Let me back up. John's absolutely correct. What I'm talking about is the sulfuric acid in the ether, and ether having it's about 70% plus in the collodion. Nitrocellulose, alcohol, and ether makes your raw collodion. That if that ether isn't washed well, you can have the same thing. And I've seen a batch of bad ether as well too. So there's a lot of spinning plates, as I say, in the process, and you have to kind of watch all of them. And depending on where you get your products from, who makes them, there's a lot of, I've seen some stuff, Chinese. I've seen the Chinese market come in with glacial acidic acid and completely destroy the developing stuff. I've seen, I think that ether, that bad ether, that one time was out of China too. A lot of these stores and places that sell these chemicals buy these from manufacturers in 55-gallon drums. So they mass produce this stuff. And a lot of times they'll have, something come through, not a lot of times, but sometimes they'll have something come through that's just terribly bad. And that was that collodion that Mike had. And I don't know where the ether came from. I saw a couple of different places, but, and the glacial acidic acid I knew came, that was bad stuff, and really screwed up people's, couldn't figure out what, was it the substrate, what was going on, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So yes, you check your stuff because it can definitely end up being beyond your stuff, your own mixing or your environment. It might not be you. Most of the time it is what we say pilot error, but sometimes, these products change all the time. And I don't care what anybody says. I saw a change in the aluminum, how it was made between 2013 and 2015. There were batches that would just completely fog whatever they were using, that baked anodized aluminum, the tin types, quote unquote, the alumitypes. I had batches that older stuff that would be just fine, same everything, and whatever they manufactured, they went to a cheaper product, changed the recipe, whatever it was, just wouldn't work in wet collodion. I witnessed that, I documented it, and it would just, they just change them. And keep in mind, this is really important to remember, all of the products we use are not made, for the most part, are not made for photographers. They're made for something completely different. So if a manufacturer finds a way they can save 2 or 3 cents or a little bit of money on this by changing that, they don't say, hey, wet collodion photographers, is this going to screw you up? They don't ask us. You just keep on buying it, and all of a sudden, oh my God, I can't make a photograph. What's up? Really interesting stuff. And one more thing I'll mention, not that this is bad chemistry, it's just things we have to learn in the production of this stuff. A few years ago, when you went to make collodion chloride prints, they wouldn't work. They looked like what Muhammad was talking about, his images melting. And research. Well, come to find out that nitrocellulose will not withstand collodion chloride prints at 4%. So the total assay on your collodion should be 4 to 8%. You need at least 5% nitrocellulose to make pop prints. So now if you go to Mike at Artcraft, he has pop collodion and positive collodion. The 4% works great on tin types and aluma types and, you know, ambro types. It works fine. But once you mix that for collodion chloride, I talk about this in my book, by the way, but once you mix that for collodion chloride, no go. And that's just a formulation of how much nitrocellulose is in the collodion. It's nothing bad or wrong. It's just, that's one of the caveats that we had to kind of work through. So there are different processes, require different strengths and different qualities of compounds. So at the end of the day, we're just trying to get through the we're just trying to make the best images we can and get through the things here. So yes, and that was my last slide. I want to thank everybody that's purchased my books. I really greatly appreciate it. You guys, I'm sure most of you know, I don't work anymore. I moved to the mountains the first of the month, so I don't have a job. My job is building my house. So I'm in between things right now. So I appreciate everybody that supported me that way. I truly do. I'm very grateful. I just wanted to put that out there. I was just reading the comments. John says, mine was Artcraft, but Mike replaced. Yeah, Mike's great. I can't speak more highly of Artcraft. I stay with well-known sources. I agree. Artcraft is great. Chem Savers are great. There's a lot of great places to secure your stuff in America, and in Europe I had the same experience. So at the end of the day, just know that we're not at the top of the food chain when it comes to chemistry, and you've got to be aware that sometimes, you know, don't immediately go to the manufacturer and say, hey, your product's bad. Make sure you don't have the pilot error going on. But every once in a while, if a problem persists, you should probably investigate a little more. That's what I've done over the years. And sometimes, a couple of times I've been right. It doesn't happen often, but a couple of times I've been right on that. So, but at the end of the day, we're just trying to, like I said, make the images. So thank you, Jan. I always appreciate you guys in. I appreciate you guys coming. Can we somehow get a collective resources page created? Anyone can add and update periodically. I know it's time consuming. Don't know how to publish it. Weekly on the Facebook page, maybe. I'm willing to collect resources and put resources together. Yeah, let's talk about that. I will do that. And obviously, we can link every single one of these YouTube videos up. People share great resources in there, like Thomas and John today. Everybody, I mean, everybody throws something in the comments. Yes, I think we should. Those are great. Those are great things to have access to, because people can't read. I know I can't. I watch a YouTube show or something. I have to screenshot it and save it or whatever. I can't remember all that stuff. So we'll look at that, Jan. So that was an hour, 43 minutes. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe. Have a great weekend. I appreciate all your time and your attention, and be safe. John says he'd be willing to help, Jan. Get a hold of John. He's a great guy. He's super resourceful. Wonderful guy. Thanks, Thilo. Thanks, John. Thanks, Jan. Thanks, Thomas. Ciao, ciao. Have a great weekend. Ciao.